Yeah, he said he said it was fine. He tested the mic. He said they can hear me, so it'll be okay.
Oh, I see that it is recording. Perfect. Can you hear me? Yeah? I don't think it's doing something. How about now? Yeah, better. So it is with great pleasure that I want to introduce Samir Kulkarni, who graduated from Yale, got his MBA in 1999. And he is the CEO and owner of Showcase. Now, when he graduated from Yale, he bought this retailer chain, and at the time it was 12 stores, and today he has grown it to be 101 stores, saturating the Canadian market. And in addition to his role as CEO and owner of Showcase, he also directs the Kulkarni Family Private Equity Group, which invests in the consumer, manufacturing, and finance sectors globally. And today is going to show us how strategic communication plays in the real world, and he has some valuable lessons to teach us. And so I hope that you all welcome him with great clapping.
Thank you so much, Tally. Appreciate it. Can you guys hear me? Awesome. All right. So thank you so much, Tally, for having me. It's been 15 years since I was a student here. I came back for my 15th year reunion in the fall and got to see the beautiful building. So congratulations to you all on what SOM is and what it's becoming and what it's built. It's amazing. So this is a simple class for you guys. Guest speaker, no homework, This is fantastic. We'll try to make this interactive, and I've been told I can move around. And so Tally has wanted to make this class a sort of a fun and interactive session to talk about strategic communication, specifically to talk about how to deliver effective presentations. So we'll be talking a little bit about what we do at Showcase, and then we're going to get your help for an interactive portion near the end. So with that, shall we get going? All right. So I'll give you a bit of a background on who I am and who Showcase is. By the way, are there any Canadians in the group here? One. Brother. All right. Welcome. Late? Was it the snow? Was it too much snow to get here? Is that the issue? So I'll give you a bit of background on us and the Showcase business. We'll talk about communication at Showcase, the evolution of that communication over time because it's changing. And then we'll do the live example and have some Q&A. So with that, let me jump in. Who has been to the great city of Toronto? All right, fantastic. Tally used to live there. Okay, so this is where I was born and raised, born just outside of Toronto. And I lived in India for a few years, learned the language and the culture and cuisine and all that, but for the most part, have been in Toronto as part of a family business group. So my dad was an engineer at Nortel in the 70s. He was an entrepreneur at heart, and so he started a business and has been building the portfolio over time, and then other family members joined the business. And so I really grew up in the boardroom. I grew up wearing a suit and tie every day, going to meetings and going to presentations, and that's what I did on long weekends and summers and everything in between. So business really has been in my blood as an entrepreneur since the very beginning. So then I came to Yale. I was going to show the picture of the old building, but then I thought instead I'll show this picture. This is, so I came to Yale in the fall of '97, I guess. And the first thing I realized is that you must be at least 21 or older to be served. So I was 20 years old at the time. And frankly, this was all very new to me. I had worked and run a business during undergrad, and so I came here right after undergrad with business knowledge, but with not a lot of work experience outside of the family group. And so for the first couple of weeks, I couldn't drink, which is fine. But I turned 21 soon thereafter. The most fun I had at SOM actually was running a club. It was the Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness Club. I don't know if they still have that here or something like that, but anyway, at that time it was virtually a non-entity. So I was a member of this club. I was one of 4 members of the student club. So it was a really popular, exciting program to be a part of. And the challenge was that basically no one knew about the club. This club is all about leadership, organizational effectiveness, strategic communication, all these things that are important, and yet no one seemed to know what the club was. No one seemed to attend any of the events. And so a buddy and I, a classmate and I, decided to run the club in our second year. And so we went to actually the handoff meeting, and we got a super Stop and Shop plastic bag, okay, with the files for the club, and that was basically the handoff. That was our training. And it was like, you take it from here, good luck next year, okay? So we brainstormed. We looked at all the 2x2 matrices we had learned in class and all of the different theories, and we said, how are we going to make this club really, really special in our second year? And all of that boiled down to a very, very simple but brilliant, brilliant move, and that was to rename the club the A1 Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness Club. Anyone know why this is really, really important? Go ahead.
So when you're listed, you're first.
Absolutely. The trick of many plumbers and other people in the Yellow Pages to name their business AAA1 or A1. Yes, that's exactly the reason. So when incoming students saw the list of all the clubs on campus, before they got to consulting and finance and all the ones that were going to take away our members, they saw A1 Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness Club. And then from then, we sent out strategically worded emails about how all the cool people were in A1. This was the club to be a part of. You don't want to miss out on this. And so we actually started building up a huge membership, and we built it up to 100 people. One of the fun things that we did was, it started as a bit of a joke, but we decided to have every event at A1 rhyme. Okay, rhyme with the previous event. And so the first event we came up with was the A1 Career Extravaganza. Okay, sound good? Right? You can learn about careers in this sort of field. But then we had to rhyme the next event with extravaganza. Anyone know what we came up with next? Go ahead. Bonanza, yes. The next one was the A1 Video Bonanza, okay? And we thought we were on a roll now. Video Bonanza, we told the story of the Seattle Fish Market and the fish video, if you've heard of it. But then it got really tricky because there were no more words in the dictionary we could think of that would really work. And then it hit us late one night when we should have been studying econ or something. We came up with the best name, the A1 Tony Danza, who really is the boss of study and employee empowerment. Okay, so this was, we're getting really exciting. And then to finish it off, the fourth and final event, any guesses? Extravaganza, Bonanza, Danza. It was the A1 George Costanza, the free rider problem. Okay, and so it was a little bit of fun. We had fun here, but really what it showed me is it opened my eyes to the power of communication. The fact that you can make things fun, that you can add some style and some sizzle to something that was really good to start with, but people just didn't know about it. And so I graduated in '99 and tried to figure out what to do next. I wanted to go back to the family business, build an empire, and there was an opportunity to acquire this chain. It was called Showcase. There were 12 stores, not much to look at, mainly selling as seen on TV products. Those products you see on those wacky infomercials that say not available in stores, call now. We were the depot for those products where you could come in, try it before you buy it, and buy it, hopefully. And it was a franchise model. Today, so basically it was a smart idea waiting to be refined, and today we built it to 101 stores, which basically is saturation in Canada. There are only 30 million people, roughly. And so we're the world's largest retailer of our kind, and this is sort of what the stores look like now. So it's been a fun ride. I'm actually speaking to the Entrepreneurs Club after this, and I'm going to tell that story of how that happened. But anyway, that's who we are today. Basically, we're Canada's trend retailer. So in the U.S., you've got people like Brookstone and Sharper Image. Sharper Image is now gone. Brookstone went under last year. And in Canada, you have Showcase, the home of the hottest trends. It is a fun and interactive experience, like I understand this class is, fun and interactive. And so that's who we are, that's what we do, and these are the sorts of products we sell. So products like the No-No hair remover, intriguing product, okay? People want to know, does it work, does it hurt, right? They come in wanting to know more. Green coffee, a weight loss product. Wen, which is the unshampoo. NutriBullet from the makers of the Magic Bullet, so it's a food emulsifier. Zumba, the Latin dance fitness craze, the DVD. Insanity, a workout video, and even wacky products like the Shticky by Vince, the man behind the ShamWow. The idea is that we catch the trends early. So we've developed analytics to figure out what to buy, how to get in on a trend before other retailers can, and really bring it to life in store. So that's sort of what our business model is. Any questions on who we are? Go for it.
What kind of work do you guys do around sustainability?
That's a great question. We don't do enough around sustainability. It's a topic that we can't get into today, I think, in any great amount of detail, but I wish we were doing more. Any other questions? Go ahead.
So what are these specific things you do, to catch the trend?
Right. So it's become a business of big data. So we've developed algorithms. We take data sets both inside the organization and outside, and we're able to find the insights out of those pieces of data and figure out when to get in, when to get out, how much to buy, how to price it. And so essentially we're investment managers, but instead of a mutual fund of stocks, it's a mutual fund of trends.
How do you do that, when you first acquired the business?
Right, okay. So I'll be talking about that in my next session at 11:45. But it's a fun story. Happy to talk with you after as well. So let's talk about communication at Showcase. There is a lot of communication, and a lot of communication I do personally. There are product stories on television. There are business stories. We tried to acquire Brookstone. We just missed out last year, but a lot of business stories around that. There are sales conferences for our sales staff. We have 800 salespeople in the stores. They need to be trained. They need to be motivated and encouraged. There are staff events for, obviously, our head office staff and some of the senior management. And then there's vendor and landlord meetings. That's actually, if you Google business meetings, that's the first image. So that's why that image is there. But the idea is that we contort and conform to the agenda of the meeting and the goal of the meeting. And so we go through hoops to bring vendors and landlords on side with what we're trying to do. So why is communication important for us? Sure, communication is important, but why do you think it's important for Showcase? Go ahead.
Well, you're in the business of trending items.
Yes?
So, and early adopters, and you need to communicate the benefits of these new items to people.
Right.
In a convincing way, such as to make them buy.
Exactly. These are new, novel items. People need to be educated. We need to get the word out. Great. Go ahead.
They're items that people don't necessarily need, so you have to convince them that they need it.
Yes, exactly. Right. These are wants, not needs. We make them needs when we're finished selling, but they start as wants for sure. Go ahead.
You said yourself that a lot of these products first become known through silly infomercials.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not only taking a new idea and making it from maybe a want to a need, but you have to deal with perhaps someone's perception that this is a silly product that was sold through a silly infomercial. So it's not really something to be taken seriously.
Exactly. So you're saying that there's a skepticism among the audience. So there may be a knowledge about it, but not necessarily the right type of knowledge. It may be that there's already a stigma associated with the product, and that's something that needs to be overcome. That's one of the reasons Showcase has been the success that it is, because there's an appetite for knowledge and information about the product. So that's for sure. Anything else? Go ahead.
It's also an element of educating your employees about how to go about these things.
Right.
And that's another form of communication.
Right, educating employees. So we have products that they've never seen before, we've never seen before, and we're learning how to demonstrate them and sell them in a retail environment and become experts quickly. So there's a lot of communication around that. One more comment around here? Yeah.
I was going to say it's a very crowded landscape. So if you're involved, there's a lot of other communication happening with consumers. So you need to stand out.
Right, so consumers are being bombarded with marketing messages everywhere, and so how do you stand out from the crowd? That's right. Okay, go ahead, one last one.
So we learned in this class telling a story is like great for communicating.
Yes?
I think each
always tell the story of why they came up with the product.
Yes.
So the ability to kind of pass that on would be like a good way to sell it.
Right, it's storytelling. It's an interesting story of how that product got invented, so absolutely. So why it's important to us is that we are constantly persuading. Everything we do is persuading. The business doesn't happen on its own. The business doesn't come automatically. And so we're persuading landlords because space is in high demand. So to get locations, you need to show that it's a concept that people want and that it's a concept that will fit well among the other tenants in the space. We're only in A and B malls in Canada, so only the major shopping centers. On the other hand, location means rent. So the better the location, the more the rent. So we have to convince landlords that we're the best tenant in the world, and that's why we should have the best location, but we need a discount on the rent. And that is always a tough sell. And the landlords focus on fashion, and we're a non-fashion use, and so that always is a challenge selling hard goods in the mall. We're constantly persuading vendors. When a product is hot, there's not enough to go around. These are emerging trends. The vendor has just hit the jackpot. And here we are, coming to them. The vendor often is selling directly to the consumer, making the full margin. And here we are coming in saying, why don't you give us a wholesale discount so that we can sell your product in store? So there's a lot of communication with vendors. Employees. It's a demonstration and selling job. It's not a typical retail job. This is not folding sweaters, right? And so there's a lot of training and motivation and encouragement around employees. And then finally, customers. I think you guys hit on all these points. Who are curious, they're skeptical, and they're still learning who we are. So, how much does communication vary by audience? We talked about those different stakeholders. How much does the communication vary depending on which stakeholder you're talking to? Go ahead.
I'm not sure how much your tactics really vary. I think it's pretty similar. Your message changes.
Uh-huh.
You adjust it for a different audience, but I think tactically you're using all the same persuasive techniques.
Okay, so there's some founding principles that you would use in all communication, but you may change the content depending on the agenda. Is that what you're saying? Okay, great. Other comments? Go ahead.
I was going to say there's a lot. I've had some sales and restaurant industry experience and trying to sell to very different types of customers, and it requires a completely different approach from the very beginning of the conversation. How do you say hello? To all the way to explaining how this product fits into their lives and how you construct that need. So my limited experience, I found it to vary enormously.
Right, okay, great. So it varies enormously. Go ahead.
Add on to that. I think, the content has to change. So for the landlord, you have to persuade them that you can bring the highest traffic in that mall.
Yes.
I mean, for the vendor, you have to persuade them you can kind of, build up an image of brand that they really want. For the employees, you have to persuade them they can learn fast, grow. They has a sense of kind of ownership in the company. And for the customers, I think just solve their problem. So all the
Right. So you're saying every audience has a different goal, a different need, and so the communication would vary. I'll just move forward. We can cover things as we go here. But in our experience, the communication varies completely. There may be some guiding principles, but every one of these things varies wildly based on who you're talking to and what about, and who has the power, and what we're trying to achieve, what our timelines are. All of these things will change the objectives, the format that we use, whether it's in person or whether it's by phone or whether it's something else, to the level of detail that we'll provide. There are times when we should give a lot of detail, there are times when we should give almost no detail, and it varies obviously in content. And so in our view, it varies completely. And I'll give you an example. Vendor negotiations. And so I'm going into one of those bubbles, just vendors. And even among vendors, there's a wildly different set of communication goals. And let's take two contrasting examples. So one vendor is Disney or a Disney distributor, and the goal is to get the supply of Frozen toys first and fast. So Frozen is a big hit, and it's a movie, and there's merchandise around this, and we want to get the product first and fast, faster than Toys R Us or anyone else. On the other hand, there's a China factory where we're also buying toys, but in this case, these are private label toys. They're not branded, and we're trying to negotiate supply of those toys. So, how does the communication strategy vary between these two vendors? Go ahead.
Well, I'm guessing with Disney, the goal is to convince them that it's worthwhile selling to you when they could be selling to Toys R Us or whatever.
Right.
And in the private one, so in the Disney one, it seems like they have a lot of the power
Yes?
in the negotiation, and in the China factory, I think it's the other way around. They must be more than willing to give you all of their inventory.
Sure. So you're saying with Disney, Disney has more of the power than we do, and so we have to persuade them to give it to us instead of someone else.
Right.
In the China factory, you may have many options, right? And so the power is more on our side. Other thoughts? Go ahead.
There's probably some large cultural differences. So negotiating with the China factory, maybe you should do it in person, maybe you should send a local, understanding the local customs.
Sure. So there are cultural differences. So in China, you may do things a little bit differently. Other thoughts? Go ahead.
Those China factory, they may only care about, you pay the money.
Yes?
Disney, they care more about the brand.
Very good. So Disney cares much more about their brand, and China cares much more about their money, a China factory. Okay? That's one of the fundamental differences in the type of conversation that you have with vendors. With Disney, telling Disney that they can make a lot of money by selling to us is not a good strategy. They're going to make a lot of money anyway. They're going to make a lot of money selling it to us or anyone else. What we need to talk to Disney about is the power that we can bring to their brand, to activate their brand, to bring the magic to life in a retail environment, right? Which is a different sort of conversation than saying we can sell a lot. Okay? With the China factory, it's about volume, right? How many cars are you going to buy, and at what price, and are you going to pay us on time, right? That's what a China factory would care more about. Oh, sorry. In Disney, typically it would be in person to share the gospel, share the message of what Showcase can do. It's about how do we spread the frozen gospel, reach a broader audience than the Toys R Us customer. That's a big one. We need to show flexibility, that we can work with their bureaucracy and their timelines and do whatever we need to. So for example, with Frozen last year, it was the big Halloween costume. Everyone wanted to be Elsa, okay, for Halloween. And so we flew airplanes of Frozen costumes from China on October 3rd so that we had them for Halloween. Okay? It's something that another retailer would not normally do. So being flexible about what we can do, when we can do it, and how we can adapt to their situation. And we are willing to pay more and willing to pay up front, okay? Which is, again, something that a typical retailer would not say. Okay? On the other hand, China, typically we can handle by phone and email. There's to the cultural point raised earlier, if you're dealing with the right types of factories who are used to exporting, there's a similar culture when you're dealing with those people. And so phone and email often is sufficient. We have lots of options, and we could buy that private label car from other people. We need the lowest cost, but we can give them repeat business. So we can buy more and more over time, start of a good relationship. So here's an example of varying formats, even among one stakeholder. And the communication strategy varies wildly. So, if the strategy varies by audience, then are there any universal rules? Any guiding principles? Anything that applies in all communication? Go ahead.
Clarity of message, maybe?
Clarity of message? Okay, clarity of message. That's an interesting one. There are times when clarity hurts you. We'll talk about that too. Go ahead.
To come out of the consistency of message.
Consistency of message. Okay. To one stakeholder, that you're always consistent. Okay. Great. Sorry.
Understand the need of your audience, what they want to hear from you, what's their need.
Sure. Yes. Understanding the needs of the audience. Okay. What's in it for them? Go ahead. Okay, polite communication. You don't want to take a harsh tone. Okay. There's sometimes when you definitely want to take a harsh tone. It depends what the situation is. But Ideally, you want to have a nice, pleasant conversation that builds a relationship, sure. So let's talk about some universal rules, and I'll throw some proverbs up on the screen, and I'd like to, just by a show of hands, tell me if you agree with the proverb, okay? Here we go. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Agree? Okay. The early bird gets the worm. Agree? Don't sweat the small stuff. Okay, fewer people, all right. Okay, so about half of the audience seem to agree with these, and these are pretty good proverbs, but guess what? There's an equal and opposite proverb to every one of these, okay, which is also considered to be a truism. Nothing ventured, nothing gained is true, but better safe than sorry. Right? The early bird gets the worm, but haste makes waste. So don't go too fast. And don't sweat the small stuff, but the devil is in the details. My point here is that there's a proverb or a theory or a rule of every type. And you can find one that is on this side or on that side, and you can find contradictory ones, and you can find ones that make things more confusing. There's always a rule that you can draw on. The question is not whether there's a rule or whether there's a theory. The question is which theory, right? Which one counts in the situation that you're in? And knowing how to tell which one of those to follow has been a key to success for us. And so the point is that there is no universal rule. Pick the ones that achieve the goal. So let's talk about evolution of communication at Showcase. In 2002, I pulled out a real presentation from 2002, and I just want to show it to you in a bird's eye view. That's what it looked like. Okay. This was a presentation to a landlord about why they should give us more locations. Any comments, first impressions on what you think of this presentation? Lots of letters, yes?
Yeah.
Yep. Too much text? Uh-huh.
No, it's hard to read. It's
Yes.
black background with yellow letters.
Right. Color selection, hard to read? Absolutely. Let's take one specific slide out of there. And tell me what's wrong with this slide. Go ahead. Not sustainable enough? Is that what you're going to say? Okay.
I'll be that person.
Okay.
And you only have one main bullet point, and then you have all these sub ones.
One main bullet point, right?
Point and that makes your one bullet point.
Exactly. If it's only one bullet, why have bullets? Right, back there.
It's probably not the most effective way to visually describe what it is that your procedure here.
Right. It's not visual. It's not the best way to describe. Back there.
There's actually no summary. It's not like
No summary, no takeaway at the end.
Probably this is just an example. It's not even well centered.
It's not even centered, right?
Yeah.
So it's not aesthetically elegant, right? Go ahead.
First, it's too many details, and also like a lot of terms.
Yep. Too many details, too many terms, too many words. Yes.
You said this is for the landlord, and I don't think you care.
About parts and warranties, right? Good point. This actually was a store presentation. I said from that from the landlord presentation, but this was actually from a store training presentation. So good catch. Thank you.
Who is Rob?
Who is Rob? Exactly. Who is this guy Rob, and why isn't he solving this problem for us? Yes. Okay. Right. So not enough clarity on the background. Yeah. Go ahead.
And it seems like you just wrote everything that you're going to read and everything you're going to say.
Great, yeah, absolutely. This is how you might explain something if you were sitting in front of them and telling them, but this is not the way a slide will be best understood. In fact, when people are watching a presentation, they can only do one thing at once. They can either listen or they can read. Okay? They can either listen or they can read. So when you have lots of words on a slide, they're reading, or they're not reading and they're listening. But there's no way they're going to get both pieces of information. Okay. So it's text heavy, it should be graphical, there's no clear takeaway, right? So let's take another example. This is a slide from the landlord presentation. We talk about what sort of retailer we are with a credible alternative. You know, you can read it there for a second. So that's an example of how we used to do things, and I'll show you a slide of how we do it now. Obviously, this is too dry, too clinical. We want to show, we don't want to tell. Okay. And so this is what the slide looks like now. Curl Secret is the world's first fully automatic hair curler made by Conair. We bought Conair's global production of Curl Secrets 2 Christmases ago. We did demonstrations in our stores. Women would come in, and obviously the first question is, does it work, and will it work on my hair? And so we let them find out for themselves. So we had interactive stations. Here are some of the customers actually trying them, in the store. And we bring your product to life. Go ahead.
Do you think there are too many photos in this slide?
Could be.
I find it a little overwhelming.
Good.
I'm not sure if that was a strategy.
Right, so perhaps you're saying that if there was one great photo, it would be better than 5 photos, or 2. Absolutely, that's great, good feedback. So we've moved from a tell to a show. Okay? And the reason we moved to a lot of photographs on a slide, or more photographs on a slide and less text, is that then we can talk the story and tell the story as people look at the image. Okay? The point is we engage the audience. If you see the title of the after slide, we bring your product to life. We're talking to that person, right? We bring your product to life, not products, but your product. We use images, and we have only one key point per slide. So this slide only talks about demonstration. It doesn't talk about all the other things that are on the before slide. So instead, we might have 6 slides, each one of them dealing with one of those bullet points. Go ahead.
What was your learning process that enabled you to move from the left to the right? Did you go to a clinic that taught you how to improve PowerPoint presentation?
We learned a lot from trial and error and seeing what presentations and messages resonated. We often had communication that would fall flat. We would deliver a presentation and yet the landlord didn't get the point at the end, didn't get the message, couldn't tell us what our message was. So we learned a lot through cues like that. And I think another thing is watching other great presentations, right? And learning from those. Like TED Talks has been a great way for people to learn about presentations, although a lot of that format doesn't apply in a business context because there's not enough detail at all. It's for a very broad audience, but a lot of good direction came from that in terms of using imagery and storytelling more than text. Let's talk about the evolution of style versus substance. This is a fact. Okay? The average adult has an attention span of 8 seconds, and the average goldfish has an attention span of 9. This is true. This is science. Look it up. This is science. And guess what? 10 years ago, the average adult had an attention span of 12 seconds, and so it's dropped by 1/3 in a decade. This means that the goldfish has a distinct advantage over modern-day adults. Okay? Have you noticed this?
Yeah, we have thumbs.
You have thumbs, exactly. You have the winning edge. Why do you think this has happened? Why are attention spans down? This is not news, really.
There are a lot of distractions.
Distractions, yeah.
So we did an experiment in one of my classes a few weeks ago where everyone took their phone and put the volume on high and just left it on their desk.
Yes.
And presentator just gave the presentation. And literally every second and a half, a phone was buzzing.
Yes.
And it just kind of helped you visualize the extent of the distractions that is happening in the audience.
Right, so more distractions, more technology, making it easier, grabbing your attention. Other things? There's a lot more information. So people don't like to have large blocks of text. It's too much hassle. Just tell me what the point is, right? Go ahead. Yes, a lot more people with ADD, right? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, 24/7 news cycle.
24/7 news cycle, right? So a lot more things hitting you.
We live in a time in which you can get almost the same quantity or quality of information in less time. So
Yes.
it isn't just that there are more distractions, it's that I can get basically the same amount of learning from something in seconds that used to take minutes. So
Okay.
It's faster to receive and digest information.
Right, so the information is delivered in a better way so that you can actually digest it more easily and more quickly than it used to be. Okay, fair enough. The point is, with a smaller attention span, it is easier than ever to influence, to deceive, and to distract. Easier than ever to influence, deceive, and distract. Okay. And this is key point of the evolution of presentations and communication, because things are changing. So let's take an example. Let's take this graph as an example. Massive increase in home price. Massive. Look at that red bar. It's 3 times the size of the blue one. Massive. What's the problem?
Jeremy's leading with a scale.
Scale, obviously. Scale problem, right? Scale goes from 79,000 to 82,000. Well, of course, you're going to have one that's probably on the lower side and one on the higher side. This is the same graph with a proper scale. Okay? If you show it from scale 0, you can see that the house prices are pretty much the same. But people want the point. People want the point. They want to see, they look at it and say, yeah, red is bigger than blue. Big headline. Massive increase. What else do I need to know? Okay. Well, there's a lot more you need to know. But style can be used to make a point, even when it's not a fair point. Okay. So it's easy to confuse and mislead with graphs and statistics. Really easy. Really easy. So this is sort of the Yale SOM part of this, where there's a responsibility on how you communicate, because it's really easy. And these days people don't have attention. You can get them to think anything if you just have the right font and the right graph and the right stat at the right time. You can get people to believe. Let's take the example of headlines themselves. Okay? Headlines have become more and more and more important because people don't read the article. They read the headline. And it doesn't matter, even if the first line of the body of the article says the opposite of the headline, it doesn't matter. People remember the headline, not the body. Okay? And you see this online. I call it the Upworthy effect. Okay? Upworthy, with the clickbait headlines. Here's one. There's no way I'm ever shopping at Walmart again unless this gets fixed now, right now. Wow. Sounds like there's big news. Something has happened at Walmart. There's some urgency. There's some ethical reason that you should not shop at Walmart anymore. And it seems like there's a real problem that this author has discovered and is sharing with you. Well, if you read the article, you read the whole thing, it says, the reason is the owners of Walmart are wealthy. Okay? That's the story. The owners of Walmart are wealthy. Well, guess what? They've been wealthy for quite some time. I don't think it's news that they're wealthy. And it's not necessarily wrong that they're wealthy. They've done well. But there's no urgency, there's no news, and yet it makes it seem like you should stop everything you're doing because there is news. Okay, so here's a headline that is disingenuous about what its mission is. Although they may have a good point in there, the headline is deceiving. The point is that headlines frame a topic. They open minds and they create urgency. But be wary of tricking yourself and tricking others. Okay? It's very easy to do that. It also means that the headline at the top of a presentation, at the top of a slide, is the most important real estate, because people will read that even if they don't read the rest. Okay, so time for a live example. Are you ready? So this is a real presentation to vendors that we are delivering right now, actually this month, to our vendor community. It's about a real problem that we have. And the problem is that the Canadian dollar is weakening. I don't know if this makes the headlines in the US, but it's a huge problem in Canada. The Canadian dollar is weakening. Do you know why? Price of oil, yes. All right, so oil-driven economy. So the Canadian dollar is weakening. So all of the imports that we get from America and from China and everywhere else, we pay for in US dollars, making those imports more expensive, increasing our costs. And so the goal is to educate and persuade vendors to lower costs in 2015. Okay? That's the goal, to lower costs. Basically charge us less for the same product. Now that is called a win-lose situation, right? For every penny they give us, it came out of their pocket and it comes into our pocket. And every penny extra we pay them, again, it's win-lose the other way. So this is a tricky one to achieve. And so I'm going to actually show you this presentation, and then I'm going to ask you, what theories are we using, and what should we be doing differently? What could we improve on? Okay? Ready? Okay. Welcome, our vendors. Thank you so much for being here. This is an update on the great successes we had in 2014, and a view of what 2015 looks like in our partnership. And we appreciate that partnership greatly. It's been a phenomenal partnership. We're going to talk about some of the wins we've had together in the past and how we can move forward. We achieved 100 stores in 20 years. It wouldn't have been possible without you. Thank you so much for your support. It really is a true vendor-retailer partnership. Unlike your other relationships, perhaps with other retailers that have their own agendas and that have their own bureaucracies and so on, this really is a partnership between two companies. And it's been our honor to partner with you. So it's everything from our real estate that gives your brand high-profile retail traffic in 100 malls across Canada. It's the trend analytics that give you on-demand insight and data, gives you actionable knowledge that you can take back to help drive your brand strategy going forward. It's vendor collaboration, first access to product, exclusives. It's a flexible model to support the vendor's brand goals, right? Depending on what your goals are and what it is that you'd like to achieve with your product. For example, with Conair, you wanted to demonstrate the product in stores. We made that happen. Salesmanship. We know our products, and our sales staff become the army for your brand, going and spreading the gospel with product knowledge, demos, training, and service. We market with flyers to millions of Canadian homes, 52% of English Canada. Strong public relations. We get your brand into the mass media, onto breakfast television shows and into the news, talking about how this is a great product. So it gives credibility outside of your own advertising. Merchandising. With best-in-class displays, packaging, we bring your product to life in the store. Customer base, our loyal customers who look to us to find out what's new and what's trending. And at the back end, a strong controlled system with SAP, central control, so you know with confidence that your brand is looked after across Canada. The value to you is exposure in terms of credibility, direct customer feedback, public relations, and engagement. Actually, customers engaging with your brand and with your product in a fun and interactive way drives volume. It moves volume, it grows your business, and that's why we can do 10 times the volume of a mass retailer per store, because we focus on that product. It also drives your direct response. That means that you're doing your own advertising, you're selling to customers through your own channels. It's driving those channels as well, because a lot of people see the product and get those demonstrations, but they don't necessarily buy it from us. And that means more lifetime customer revenue for you. So let's take some examples of recent vendor partnerships and what we did for you in 2014. And let's start with No No Hair. No No Hair is a hair removal system. It's a treatment that you apply to your skin, and over time, hair growth is reduced. And so the challenge is to leverage curiosity about this $300 personal care item with demonstrations, education, and retail exposure. And so here's what we did for the No No brand in Canada. We did classroom training across the business and demonstration units for constant live demos everywhere across the country. Online training and testing. We've invested heavily in e-learning so that the best practices from around the country of how to demonstrate the product, the tips and tricks for best use, and after-sale service comes through online training and testing and internal forums. We did a 3D retail try-me display. Imagine a 4-foot by 4-foot display, larger than life, bringing people over. We did 16 live television appearances. We did 38 national flyers. And we even had dedicated demonstration kiosks for people who wanted to get an even more in-depth No-No experience. And the result? $50 million in retail sales on one item alone. Higher sales per door than Neiman Marcus, than Bed Bath & Beyond in the US. And we drove the vendors' direct response. And our staff were even featured in the vendors' infomercials. And that's the extent of the partnership that we had together. And the CEO of No-No called our sales mind-boggling in a recent trade publication. Here's an example of the type of partnership that we have with you. Okay. So keep thinking. I'll take my hat off for a second. Keep thinking. What theories are we using? What could you improve? And here's a hint. Have I brought up Canadian dollar pricing yet? Not at all. Let's take another example of Disney Frozen. Here it's a different goal. The goal was to bring the magic of the movie to life in store through merchandise, events, and contests. And so we had a national TV PR roadshow going across the country, really sharing the magic of the movie and saying that this was the gift to give this Christmas because it was the magic of the movie in a product. We had contests and social media activation. We had in-store dress-up events. Everyone wanted to be photographed with Elsa. That's a picture of real lineups outside a very small showcase store there for everyone. In fact, there's a girl there who's dressed up as Elsa waiting in line to get her picture. So we really activated the brand, made it a real engaged live experience. And then, of course, Canada's largest selection, 250 different SKUs of various frozen merchandise. And the result, in 4 months, 569,000 units sold. We beat every major retailer in stock and selection. We created brand buzz and activated that brand across Canada. So these are the examples of the types of partnerships that have made us successful and have helped drive your business. And these are the types of things we can draw on as we think about how to work on your brand in 2015. So now let's talk about the year ahead, their realities, their opportunities, and their challenges. One of the things that's changing in the economic landscape is that with more value added, there are also higher costs to us. For example, 5 years ago, we only had 50 stores. Now we have 101. It's a larger operation. Flyer production is now handled by external agencies. The flyer distribution now goes to a much broader percent of the population. Media and public relations are now handled by PR firms, and we had 65 different appearances in the Christmas season alone. Systems now with SAP, obviously not a cheap solution, but a very powerful one. Distribution centers, now we have multiple distribution centers across Canada. And when you look at the economics of the store operations, it's a daunting situation. Rent has gone up 14%. Labor has gone up 9%. Meanwhile, the Canadian dollar is plummeting. It's dropped 16% in the year. But you don't have to believe us. Canadian dollar is forcing prices up everywhere. Look at some of these headlines. The Canadian dollar hasn't dropped this much since the financial crisis, and the tailspin isn't over yet. The Canadian dollar slump hikes cost of U.S. imported goods. Looney's plunge of 10% will lead to higher prices. This is affecting all retailers in Canada. Prices are going to go up unless we do something. And we've done tests. We tested increasing prices, and we found that raising the price equates to a 30% drop in volume. So let's take an example. A year ago, we would have bought a product for $15 US, landed in Canada for 20 Canadian dollars, and sold it for $39.99. Well, what happens is, if we raise the price to $49.99, the unit volume will drop by 30%, and the sales dollars will drop by 21%. And it's not just a drop in volume, but it's a drop in momentum. It's a drop in motivation. It's a salesperson who said, I sold that at Christmas for $39, now I got to charge $49. I don't feel good about that. So it's a drop in momentum. It's a disruption to the value that we're bringing every day for your brand. So if we raise price, unit volume will drop, but we have a second option. And the second option is to lower cost. And with just a small reduction in cost, we can preserve the retail price. What that means is that there's no loss of volume. What it also means is that there's no loss of momentum. There's no loss of motivation. There's no loss in the community for your brand that is growing. It's more people who are getting those demonstrations, that are taking those products home, that are sharing those stories about your brand with their friends and family. There is no disruption to the value that we're bringing. So, help us preserve your volume. And we'll do our part as well to grow it. We'll support your volume with better and better displays, banners, 3D displays in store, 3D video in the storefronts. We'll support your brand with marketing, better and better flyers to larger and larger populations, with special call-outs, building your brand community on our website. We'll support your brand with selling support, more product knowledge, more forums, sharing those tips and tricks, more role plays, more mystery shops, more brochures and training guides to really make sure that our customers are getting the very best of what your brand has to offer. We'll invest $3 million and more advertising your products and flyers this year. Here's the schedule. So we're going to be investing in flyers around gift periods and around Christmas time and important selling times, so that your brand isn't a product that you just buy for yourself, but it's a brand that you can give to a special person in your life that says that this brand is my way of showing that I care. And we'll give you a product focus in store. Here are all the different things that we do, and here are all the list prices for the various things that we can do, for the out-of-pocket investments that we have to make to activate your brand. But we're going to slash all those and make it really, really simple. And it's only going to cost $50 per store for some of these value-added features. So we thank you. It's a really exciting year ahead. There are some realities that we have to address. But with your support, we can make 2015 the best year ever. Thank you so much. Okay. That's the presentation. Don't clap. That's the presentation. Okay. That's the presentation. We've delivered this to a number of vendors already, and I'll tell you about the results shortly. So, let's hear from you. Our problem was Canadian dollars weakening. Our goal is educate and persuade vendors to lower costs in 2015. Let's start with what theories did you notice? Go ahead.
So one thing that we had talked about is that people's attention kind of dwindles as the presentation goes on. Is at its lowest point in the middle. So we noticed that you kind of front-loaded it with a lot of positive things about how the partnership really is a synergistic kind of relationship. And then you put the part where you want them to give something up in the middle where maybe retention is a little bit less on some details. And then at the end, when their attention comes back up a little bit, you're hitting back on the positive aspects.
Right, great. So the bad news is in the middle, right? When the attention may be lower. Sure, that's great. Go ahead.
I think you tried to use the reciprocity when you told them that you've done these wonderful things for these vendors, and now you ask them something, little thing back, and
yes.
it will also help there.
Right. Okay, so reciprocity showing that we're helping them and we need their help. Go ahead.
You very subtly alluded to sort of the threat of losing momentum and motivation. That's something very much back.
Yes. Right, absolutely. So without making it a threat, we showed that there's a looming problem if we don't address it. So still trying to preserve the relationship, but give them a little bit of a threat about what might happen if we don't act. Go ahead.
I thought you sort of were kind of dancing around like the prospect theory thing where you're kind of like trying to get around loss aversion. But you didn't really highlight the other half of it where it's like on the, if you lower price, then you continue to get the gain. So it's like if you strengthen that aspect more, you get more of that upside.
Right, okay, so we spoke to the loss aversion aspect, but we didn't speak to the gains as much if we do act. Okay, great. Go ahead.
Well, two things. First, you made it very personal when you talked about the examples of no-no, for example. But then one thing that I noticed is that at some points in the presentation, and probably that could be improved, it still says vendor.
Yes.
Instead of, so you're talking to them right in front of them.
Yes.
And actually, it actually happened in the middle of the presentation.
Yes.
It says vendors as if you were talking in third person.
Yes.
While in reality, you were talking to them.
Right. So those were the slides where we were talking about a specific product example. So for example, no, that was what we did for that vendor. So that isn't necessarily who we're talking to right now.
Right, there was one.
But there was another one? Okay,
yeah,
fair enough.
Fair enough. Objective, it says vendors, and you're actually talking to
Good feedback. Okay, so making it more personal in terms of language choice.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That was really strong. The only thing that I noticed that I think they might catch you on a big issue with is that in your graph about costs at a 30% decrease in volume, your costs raised by $3, but your price raises by 10.
Right.
And how do you account for the discrepancy?
Right, yep, good point. So the answer on why we chose that price point is that that's the next $9.99. So we would normally not price something at $45.99, we'd go to $49.99. But that's a good point because the price increase is higher than the cost increase.
Do the
The vendors
vendors know that?
might know that or they might not. So it might be something to clarify as to why we would choose that price point. Very good. Although I would say, I'm not sure that I would volunteer the information unless they bring up the question. Right. Okay, go ahead.
Two things. So first, you frame this as a kind of a challenge both you, so you both facing, like it's not only your problem, it's also their problem. So you're trying to help them solve the problem.
Right. So we framed the problem as a joint problem.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Second thing, like there's a data was very concise. So you
Right, so the $50 slide, we'll go back to that one for a second. Remember how we talked about not having too much text on a slide, not having too much detail? There are certain times when you want lots of text and lots of detail. When are those times?
When you want to confuse the audience?
Sure, when you don't want them to read everything, right? When you want them to just see the point that you're trying to make, but you want to make it look like, gosh, the alternative is really tricky, right? And so we have a lot of different things with a lot of different price points, and by the time you figure out how much it would have all been, you'd be here all day, right? The point is we only want them to see one number. That's $50. $50 sounds like nothing. $50 to launch one SKU, it sounds like peanuts, right? By the way, that's $50 per store, okay? It says that also in small print. It's per store. Why do we put it per store? It's a bite-sized piece, right? Per store. Reasonable, 50 bucks. Okay, well, wait a second, it's times 100, so that's 5,000 bucks. And then depending on how many SKUs they're launching and all that, it could be a big ticket. But we make it simple, we make it bite-sized. And then we can have those conversations about what the actual cost would be for them in their circumstance. But we're getting across a point. And so when you say a universal rule is don't have too much text, that's not true. Sometimes when a lot of text can help. Go ahead.
So you start with this really positive recap of the last year and how you worked together to achieve those goals. But then the slide where it says like true vendor retail partnership, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like 100% of the benefits you highlight are things that you have done, and that kind of takes away from the partnership aspect of it.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so you're going back to the earlier slide here where we talked about the vendor partnership. Let's go back.
So instead of highlighting like what the vendor has done,
Yes.
you kind of, you're as a vendor,
One way to go.
thinking, okay, like what's coming up, what's
There we go. Okay, right here. Right. So you said that we're referring to benefits to us more so than benefits to the vendor?
No, the opposite.
I'm not sure. Tell me.
Well,
Tell me again.
here are all these positive things we're doing for you.
Yes.
And then I think when I hear partnership, that it should highlight some of the positive things they've done for you as well.
Oh, I see. Very good. Okay, right. So talking about some of the things they helped us with, that they helped make happen, could show that it's been a back and forth relationship before as well. Great point. Go ahead.
So midway through, you basically said what you were looking for, which was a lower cost from them. And I think at that point, then you go on to say what we're going to do for you in the future. But to me, it seems like if I'm the vendor, it seems a bit disingenuous at that point that, you know, I want this from you, but this is all I'm going to do for you. I was just curious, what were your thoughts on having what I'm going to do for you first, and after that, ask for what can you do for me?
Right. Okay. That's a good point. So you would have the ask about the cost reduction nearer to the end?
Correct.
Okay. That's interesting. What we found is that if you put the ask too late in the presentation, you're sort of ending with the ask, which can be a negative. It's sort of ending on a negative or ending on a sort of a request that you're making that they now have to fulfill. So we like to put that sort of information closer to the middle, as was brought up earlier. But it could go either way, depending on the audience. So I take your point. Go ahead, sir.
So the other thing is, like, from a business perspective, right? If I'm looking at this, you have this cool, like, smooth presentation, right? But if I'm the vendor, I'm thinking, well, at the end of the day, I'm going to decrease my prices to you. And if volumes eventually do not increase, then, like, you know, I'm taking the entire cost of myself, right? And here is the case where you're talking about partnership. So, like, I'm thinking that, like, on your part, you know, there's not really a strong executional commitment to increasing the volumes, right? And I would have loved to show you taking part of that cost, right? In other words, well, you're saying, let's decrease your price by this much, but my retail price is still going to be $39.99, right? How about saying maybe like I will decrease it this much, right? And that will show you a commitment to really drive the volumes. That is the only way that you're going to do it.
Right. So what you're saying is that the ask was a one-way street where the vendor was taking the hit, and it might have been more palatable if we said we drop our price to share in that. So that's a great point. In fact, the first thing typically a vendor will say is, okay, why am I taking the whole hit? And that's a understandable point. So that's where the negotiations will take place after this presentation about what everyone will do. What we don't want to, we typically would not offer something at the beginning until we know what it is we're getting. Because the vendor may say, well, I can't give you a 15 or 20% cost reduction. I'll only give you a 5% cost reduction. Well, that may change how we respond to that. And so we leave that open to the negotiations that may happen afterwards.
So earlier in the presentation you gave to us, you were like, this is what we used to do, and this is what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, that's a common technique that's really effective. And I think the best part of your presentation to me was when you were like, these are the two product things that we did last year that were amazing, and they came like back to back.
Right.
Without, like a period of down in the middle. So like I don't get as much impact from because they're back to back.
Back to back.
Whereas like if you put like a lower middle, like it's like, oh, like this is what we did last year. Like this is what if we don't do this, you know, if you don't give us a cost reduction, it's gonna go back to this. And then like, by the way, this is some other success story. And then it's like, wow.
That's a really good point. Okay, so the two highlights about No-No and Frozen, which were more interesting visual stories, could have been spread out through the conversation and perhaps after the pricing discussion.
Yeah.
Great point. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm not surprised that their first reaction is, why are we taking the whole hit? But maybe something that might mitigate that is if you were just a little stronger on what happens if you don't know their price. So you sort of touched on it in a very classy, understated way. Maybe just make it a little more clear that, like, there are outside options, and we will lose, the vendor will lose their Canadian presence, and they will lose momentum, and it's very hard to get back.
Right.
Take this small hit now.
Okay, right. So we should have spelled out the downside to them more concretely.
So you showed sort of there's going to be a 30%
Uh-huh.
increase in volume, but what does that mean for
Right.
them in terms of
Right.
how hard it's going to be? If there was some statistic that you had or some way that you could demonstrate, once upon a time this brand lost their Canadian presence and it took them X years to get back
Right.
to where they were, that would be very powerful.
Right, exactly. So my biggest point about on this slide was about the loss of momentum that goes beyond the loss of volume, but the loss of momentum is not even mentioned on the slide. So I think that's a great point that that probably deserves a slide on its own about what can happen when volume drops. Go ahead.
I guess I want to know why you didn't choose to say explicitly or show it in the slide that the fact that there's a 60% drop in the power of the Canadian dollar. Why didn't we show that in the retail price? Why didn't we start with that? Like, I'm getting hurt, my margins are getting squeezed right now. Then go into what could happen to your trying to pass that on to them as well. A little bit of that, but I'm just wondering why you didn't do that as well.
Okay, so you're saying that we should have, just help me out, we should have explained the Canadian dollar?
Selling for $40.
Yes.
40 Canadian,
Yep.
but I mean the Canadian dollar is weakened. So
Right.
in reality, you're getting, if you're buying dollars, then like really getting much less. Your
Oh, I
margin is
see.
squeezed if you're still charging $50. If the vendors are still charging $50.
Right.
I guess you're not showing them your pain. You're just going to them like, this is what I want you to do. I want to go from $15 to $13 because I'm also feeling this pain because of this Canadian dollar drop. I guess visually I don't see that. I don't see how the retail price is moving from 39 to what you're really getting after that.
Right, okay, so we didn't,
Because the message is still the same, right? Like at the end you go, let's keep the vendor sales up. Like that's the bottom line I think at the end of the slide, right?
Uh-huh.
All black letters, which is great because you want to show them that you want to make their sales.
right,
You're not explicitly telling them like, yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
You're not saying like, instead of that, you could have wrote, my margins are getting squeezed, so help me out. You could alternatively said that, but.
right. So making it more personal about how it's hurting us and not just about,
Not just like, what can you do to help preserve your volume, but like, this is the hit that I'm taking as well.
right, okay, right.
Like, and this is
Sure, showing the pain internally as well.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was any thought process behind not showing that.
That's a great point. I think another thing you got me thinking now is that showing all of the prices in U.S. dollars so that vendors understand that if we keep the price the same, we're essentially giving a price decrease, right, to Canadian customers. So putting it into their terms, into their currency, because they may not know exactly what's happening up here in Canada. Okay, great. Go ahead, sir.
On this slide here, will volume not increase when you make the investments, the $3 million investment on this slide?
Yes.
It's a little bit more powerful if you have some projection. If it's not no loss of volume, volume should increase.
Right, so maybe there's, if we partner together and you lower your costs and we do more investment on the marketing side, maybe we could grow the volume. Okay.
It probably should be grown up.
Sure, win-win, exactly. Great idea. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Instead of like permanent lower cost, can we say it's like a
only because of the fluctuations in currency. So like if you were to recover, then you would change it back.
Right, okay, so you're talking about not saying it's a permanent cost reduction, but say that it's required at this moment because of the currency fluctuations and it may change. That will reduce the blow. I like that.
Well, I was going to say, you did have a graph of like the currency.
Yes?
I thought like if you just focused on that and looked at like the fluctuations, that might help you decide your point.
Right.
Like, that it fluctuates.
That it could move, it could move back. Right, so it may just be a 3-month thing, et cetera. Okay, great, yep.
Would you consider it unethical to not specify that the price decrease will only be temporary? Because I guess for you, the point I'm trying to make is that if the Canadian dollar rebounds, and you benefit from having the pricing advantage from a vendor cost perspective. So to them, you're just informing them about it now. You know, they do what they want, and then I don't know, 3 years down the line or 2 years down the line, you're still, you know, hopefully you're taking advantage of that price increase that you're able to command with your vendors.
Right, okay.
I guess the question I'm asking is, would you consider it unethical to not straightforwardly tell them that this is only a temporary fix for what we're experiencing in the macroeconomy?
Right. So no, I don't think it's unethical. I think that in product negotiations, both sides make representations about what they can afford, what's reasonable, you know, how much margin they would like to make. Just in the same way that Disney will tell us that the Elsa doll cost them $19, when obviously it doesn't cost them $19 to make. So in negotiation, there's going to be a lot of posturing back and forth, and that's sort of understood as the game of negotiation, especially around products. So no, I don't think it's unethical. I think that it would be the onus would be on them when the Canadian dollar, if the Canadian dollar improves, to say, okay, now I want that cost to go back up. Right? So that would be part of the dance that might happen depending on where the currency moves. Go ahead, sir.
Are you guys the only firm in your space?
Are we what?
Are you the only firm, like the only sort of business organization in that particular space? Is Showcase the only firm in this space that you compete?
Oh, in this space, yes. In our space, we're the trend retailer in Canada. So yes.
Okay, because I'm thinking like, you know, it's a friend that were to ask you, why is this my problem? Like, you could have hedged.
Yep.
Right? If you're not doing that, and a competitor is doing that, then like you're probably going to lose.
Okay, so it.
So maybe a follow-up question is, what role does hedging as, you know, an FX strategy like play going forward?
Right. So the vendor could have said that why didn't you, it's your problem, why didn't you hedge so that you didn't have to deal with it? So hedging is a temporary measure. It lasts only for so long. At the end of the day, you can't fight against a falling currency. And so we would say, you know, no one has a crystal ball. This is where we are right now. This is the help that we need. Why don't we revisit it in 3 months, right? Give us the cost reduction. Let's come back in 3 months and let's see where we stand, right? Yes, sir.
I really like Owen's point about talking about the future more, because as a vendor, I think the compelling story would really be why you need the money now is to invest in the future. So you talk about the growth from 50 stores to 100 stores to 150 stores, and if you don't have the money to invest, then the growth that you're realizing for your vendors will slow or stop. And so instead of talking about costs are high, so we need to keep profit margins where they are, so we're like, we need the money to continue to invest in growing the business, which ultimately grows your sales.
Got it.
Being like more forward-looking, I think we need to be more forward-looking.
Right. And so showing that the extra margins we're going to make are going to be invested in the business, in their brands, in the growth of the partnership.
Like the vendor is getting some of that back.
Is getting some of that back. Okay, great. Great. Go ahead.
Actually, that brings up a good point. I think what you showed us in the start of the presentation with Brookstone and Sharper Image going out of business, now those vendors probably have less people to sell to, and the fact that you want to grow your stores is a huge point in this presentation. That like not only if they cut back on what they're charging you now, but that's going to help you in the future as well, because you are the only person in that space, and that the relationship that you establish now is going to help them in the long term.
Great point. So you're saying that we're the horse that they should bet on because we've got the track record and we can grow even more. Great. Any final thoughts? Go ahead.
I thought the one weakness in the presentation when you said if you enable us to, if you load us price point, that we will do, we'll do more marketing, we'll do more promotion, we'll do more demonstration. We already had a terrific slide that showed all the value you're bringing to the table, and a little more either specificity on what doing more of that will mean. Is it just a function of volume? We now have more stores, so we'll be sending out more flyers, or is it we are
putting our heads together and coming up with bold, new, innovative ways to do these displays. Because you did a really great job explaining all of the value the showcase is adding. But then that leaves you with sort of a few things left in the bag to bring out. Like, in the future, this is our innovation. So whether it's scaling back a little bit, how much you discuss the value you've already brought to the table, or a little more specificity in the value that you will bring in the future, something to balance those two out, because the first got really exciting, and the other was sort of lacking for that level of richness and depth.
Okay, great point. So when we talked about the past, we were very specific. When we talked about the future, we were very vague?
Yes.
Right. So yes, I think more specificity, and I like the idea of keeping something in our back pocket and bringing it out when we talk about 2015 plans.
You thought we were good at displaying
This,
before.
exactly, just
Now this.
see this, exactly. Great idea. Go ahead.
Listening to everyone else comment on the slides, I realized that your earlier slide about the balance becomes very apparent in some ways. Because it's a signal, I mean, the whole slide deck is a signaling mechanism, right? If you focus on the pain that you are looking at in terms of the prices, you're also signaling that you're weak at this position, and that's not a good signal to the people you're talking to. So I'm thinking that everything that you've talked about, I think there's a way, the way you've thought about it is probably the best way to go about it in some ways, because you open a lot of spaces for discussion, but you're not, I mean, like clarity of message, like what I mentioned before, a lot of messages here are not clear, and that's a very good thing in this context, because you can open discussions on those topics, and that's where I think what you want to focus on.
Okay. Okay, very interesting. So it's more of a generic presentation with not as much specifics, so that you can take the conversation in the direction you want it to go depending on what the vendor is doing. So that's very much part of our strategy here, because every vendor is different. The types of things they want to talk about, the types of things they may want us to do in 2015 will vary, and so we leave that open to the conversation. This really just frames the issue. Go ahead, sir. Did you have your? I'm sorry. Someone here? Go ahead.
Yeah. When they were kind of trying to get a contract with a vendor, it'd show up with like examples of a display that they would have in the store, and it was kind of like, this is what we can do for you, like, and they would have like a completely mocked up version of like what they would do in the store. So it just kind of like expressed their commitment to the vendor and also like their creative ability and what they can do.
Absolutely. So bringing something tangible, something that they can see, they can touch, but and it also demonstrates investment, right? Time on our part to actually help build their brand. Great.
Are you giving this to a single vendor at a time or to diverse vendors all at once?
Single vendor at a time.
Could you then, I guess, when you were talking about the decrease in sales and decrease in volume, could you give them specific numbers of what that 30% actually looks like? What's that 20% decrease in revenue?
Absolutely. So this would be a generic presentation. We might add a slide or two or three depending on the vendor we're talking to. We might bring them more relevant examples. For example, the no-no vendor doesn't care what we did with frozen. It's a totally different type of product. And so we might bring health and wellness examples to cater to that audience. So absolutely. Okay?
I was wondering how tough negotiations get, considering that you are technically a monopolist in that selling space.
Okay.
And do you fear that they could eventually get together or there be a coalition of vendors and try to like open up a similar store?
Oh, I see. No, we have less power than you give us credit for. So we are, call it, the Brookstone of Canada, or whatever you want to call it, a trend retailer, but we are a small portion of what they're doing as a business. And if we don't do our job right, we can actually hurt their business more. For example, if we went out at a lower price than their advertising, that might actually disrupt their core business. Or if we offered a different return policy than what they want to offer, again, we may be more of a nuisance. And so it's a fine line. We don't have as much power as we'd like, and really we're trying to show how we can benefit their business. Okay? How are we doing on time? I'm not sure where we're at. 5 more minutes. All right. So with that, why don't I wrap up and then see if there's any final questions? Does that work? Okay. Well, thanks for that feedback. And I hear this is being recorded, so I'm actually going to take back this feedback to our team. And there are a lot of actionable items that came out of what you brought up, so I really appreciate that. Thanks so much. Let's get to the... Okay, so in conclusion, what are the big takeaways that I brought up in this talk? What are the things I want you to take away with you and think about when you're developing effective presentations? Yes?
Think a lot about your audience and kind of make sure you tailor your messages and your language to those.
Sure. Think about the audience, tailor accordingly. Show, don't tell, right? More images.
Bad news should come in the middle of the presentation.
Bad news in the middle. Not a universal rule, but yes, that's a working theory. Okay, bad news in the middle. All right. If I were to summarize it, it would be that there's no universal rule. Okay. There's a theory for everything. The wisdom comes in knowing which theory to use. Right? It will vary entirely based on the objective, based on the audience, based on the urgency, based on the power in the relationship, based on the timing and when you need a decision. It might change exactly which rule you want to follow. The second is engage the audience. Personal, meaningful messages go a long way. Images go a long way. Connect with the person. At the end of the day, you're speaking to a person. Connect with them and engage. Use communication responsibly. It is very powerful and it is very easy to influence, deceive, and distract. And so be generous with the stats you use, the headlines you use, to make a point in a responsible manner. And always have a call to action. We talked about storytelling, and movies, a presentation is like a movie, you're telling a story, but the difference is a presentation has a call to action. That's the point. You want the audience to do something. You want them to believe something, you want them to act on something, you want them to change something, and so be really clear on the call to action, have clear takeaways, and clear action items. And with that, I thank you. If there are any final questions, feel free. And if we're about to wrap up, if our timing is done, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right.